morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world tonight. This is Grant Cameron. I'm a researcher, and I'm joined by a new assistant I have who joined me to do some work in the world here, Sinead Whelehan. And first we should say Sunny Phi Lok, for all the Chinese people today. It's Chinese New Year. And we should also wish them Gung Hai Phi Choi, which is wishing them much fortune and money. And I have lots of Chinese friends. I practiced all week and then I blew it. So anyway, it's Chinese New Year, and I'm joined by Sinead. Maybe you can say Happy New Year to the Chinese people in sign language.
Oh my God. Okay, so Happy New Year.
There you go. Beautiful. Because they are a big part, like maybe 1/5 of the world. And we're going to go to another part of the world today. Sinead met me about 6 months ago, for background for people who don't know. And then about a month ago, she contacted me and I really didn't see it. And when we contacted, it was sort of like fireworks. It was like all sorts of things started to happen. And I sort of got the impression that this was somebody that I had to do something with. It comes down to some Michael Newton stuff, which I won't get into. You sort of get a clue, you sort of get a hint that this is what you should do. You get a synchronicity and stuff. So Sinead and I have had a number of bizarre synchronicities, and I'll mention one in the intro here because it's just a short one that happened just yesterday. And I want to record it because we've had these numerous ones. We've talked about some of them in past broadcasts, but Sinead has a hearing deficit, and we had talked about doing an interview, some interviews. I had suggested we doing some interviews because one of the contact modalities that I discovered was that people who have trauma, head injuries, disabilities, it seems to open the door somehow. And that people would see these as disabilities when actually they're opportunities. And I think Sinead sees hers as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I had suggested we do 2 interviews, one with Mary Rodwell, who works with a lot of children who are ADHD and these, what they call crystal children, who are able to speak alien languages, really, really bizarre stuff where it's sort of like, or with autism, a lot of them have autism and stuff. I wanted to suggest that. And then the other one I suggested to Sinead that we should do is Neil Gould, who actually wrote a book on UFOs and ADHD. He has this condition, and he wrote a whole book on it. So I suggested that, and we sort of bounced it around. And then yesterday, this is only like a couple of days ago, I suggested this. And yesterday, I get a Facebook message from none other than Neil Gould. I have not talked to him for 7 years. And suddenly he sends me this picture of this creek that he was told to take this photograph of this creek in 2011. And he said, I never knew why they asked me to take a picture of this creek. And he said, flip it sideways. And you flip it sideways, and it's a green, gray alien, like a green alien with big black eyes. And it's as clear as day. And I go, wow. And it was just so weird that we've had these bizarre synchronicities. And I think we had, at least 3 or 4 in the last 13 days. It's just really bizarre. So welcome, Sinead.
It's been 3 or 4 in I think less than a week, actually.
Yeah. It's just really bizarre. So welcome, Sinead, and thanks for taking time to talk to me again. And we're going to go through your experience in parts. So today, the part I want to do is your Peru experience. Now, for people who are familiar with my stuff, they'll know I'm into contact modalities. About that, everything is in the field, and that there's different ways that you can get into the field. And you mentioned one last night or this morning about surrender. So this is the idea that you shut down the ego mind, you surrender yourself, and you pop into the field and you get this material. Mm-hmm. So one of the contact modalities that I did a big chapter on, which is really a clear contact modality, is psychedelics. And psychedelics, a lot of people will describe whether it's psilocybin, whether it's DMT, or whether it's ayahuasca. People will describe the fact that they suddenly lost their ego and they realized that everything was alive and conscious, and they had this very bizarre experience, somewhat uncontrolled, in the field, where suddenly they're in the field and they're getting lessons and stuff like that. And Sinead has been on a spiritual journey probably her whole life. And part of that experience was an ayahuasca experience. So when we linked up, I immediately became very interested in this Peru experience with ayahuasca because I'd done a lot of study on it and I've never had the experience. So today, Sinead and I will be talking about her experience with ayahuasca. And maybe you can just sort of give a little background as to your spiritual experience and what led you to go to Peru.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's always great to talk to you and share stories. And so just thank you very much. Yeah, I have been on a spiritual journey, I would say my whole life. From the time I was very young, I've been having all kinds of experiences and didn't understand them, didn't know what they were, didn't know how to make any sense of them whatsoever, didn't recognize them for what they were. But every one of them left me with this feeling, like a particular feeling. And so the one constancy has always been this particular feeling that I get. And now it's bigger than ever because I'm having a crazy amount of communication with beings I can't see. I think there's been 3 stages that kind of led up to the ayahuasca experience. It will lead up to where I am now. The first stage was what I just mentioned, going through life, having all kinds of things happening to me, having downloads, having insights, having psychic experiences, and not understanding them, not knowing what they were, not having anybody to talk to about them, and just kind of keeping them to myself. And then gradually, as I got older, learning to dismiss them, learning to devalue them, telling myself they weren't real and I was oversensitive and overdramatic and all this stuff. So that kind of was the first stage. The second stage was when I became really, really miserable in my life. I was really having a very, very, very hard time. And things were just not working in my life. I felt a great deal of just, I don't know a better word for this right now. This is not the most articulate way of explaining it, but I just felt a lot of stuckness. I felt very stuck in my professional life, my personal life, and in a variety of other ways. And so I've always been somebody who's thought a great deal about, why am I here? Like, what is the point of my life? What is the point of me? What am I doing here? And so even when I've been in the depths of despair, so to speak, I've always thought about that. I've always thought about what is this for? And what am I supposed to be learning from this or getting out of this? And so sort of trudging through the mud of this really difficult time that I had, but not giving up and continuing to keep trying and trying and trying different things. What happened was I started getting this repeated visualization of jumping off a cliff, not in a suicidal way, but in a very, very much a letting go, surrendering, jumping into the unknown and trusting that everything would be okay, and just trusting that I would be taken care of. And that has happened to a degree far beyond what I could possibly have expected. That's the third stage. The in-between stage was when I was taking some risks to try new things, to try to get myself out of this rut that I was in. And so one of those things was going to Peru. And so I went to Peru 2.5 years ago in the summer of 2017. And it was a decision that, it was one of those things where, it's a really big trip. I'm in Toronto, Canada. It's a huge trip to get there. And so, it's complicated and there's all kinds of plans and details, but it was one of those situations where it was just flowing really well. Everything was coming together really nicely. And so it had a very sort of meant to be feeling about it. And so I planned the trip and I arrived in Peru, and I had 3 really major experiences there. And you already know that I have this big thing about 3s, because 3s are just an absolutely massive pattern in my life, and triangles are a big thing, which to me is also 3s. So the first experience was I arrived in Peru. I arrived in Cusco, the capital city, and it's at a very high altitude, and I have really intense altitude sickness for 3 days, walking around like I can't control my own limbs, my lips are blue, the whole thing. And on the evening of the 3rd day, I had my first really big experience, which was sitting on the rooftop of the hotel that I was staying at in the night air, open air, looking down into the bowl of Cusco, and just feeling like, this is so wonderful. I'm so glad I'm here. And I felt really good immediately when I got there. And again, I'm coming from feeling very miserable, like really, really, really not doing well, having a really hard time. Arrive in Cusco, and I thought at first, this is just because I'm traveling. I got away, this is exciting, it's refreshing, that's why I feel good. But I soon discovered that that wasn't actually the case. I'm sure part of it was because I was traveling, but mostly it was something about the vibration of this land. And so I'm starting to tune into that, but it's subconscious when I'm sitting on the rooftop of the hotel. And I am sitting there in a chair looking down over the bowl of Cusco, and directly across from me, on the other side of the bowl, is the Andes Mountains. They're covered in these little tiny twinkling lights, and clear as day, you know, sharp, clear detail. Those lights formed the face of a jaguar, this enormous face of a jaguar that just sat in the mountains, made out of all these lights. The nose, the lips, the ears, the eyes, the whiskers, well, not the whiskers, but the shape of the face, everything, clear, clear, clear detail. Sitting there in the mountains staring at me. And I rubbed my eyes and blinked and thought I was making this up. This is occurring because I want to have a vision. I am creating this because I want to have a vision. No, it was really, really there. And I consulted with a shaman later on who told me that, first of all, confirmed for me that the jaguar is one of the 3 main spiritual totems of Peru, which I didn't know when I saw the jaguar. I didn't know that. He also told me that it was an invitation to power. He phrased it as that was an invitation to power. Okay, so I find this out months later. At the time, I'm just sitting there on this rooftop, cannot believe my eyes that I'm seeing this jaguar, just can't believe it. And it's just sitting there and sitting there. It's not going away. It wasn't a flash. It was right there staring at me. And so that was the first big experience. There's more to that, but I don't want to go into that too much because we're focusing on the ayahuasca part of things. The second big experience was I started my spiritual journey. And on the spiritual journey, I'm going through the sacred valley of the Incas. And we had this ceremony with a shaman where we took a plant spirit called Wachuma, otherwise known as San Pedro, but that's the colonial name. So I use the indigenous name, Wachuma. And that was far out. That was just absolutely incredible, powerful, beautiful experience. And I saw some ET motifs, which at the time I didn't really think that much of because I wasn't where I am now at that time spiritually. And so that was another really incredible experience. And then the third big experience I had, again a 3, was when I went to the jungle after the sacred tour through the sacred valley of the Incas. I went to the jungle in the Amazon to do an ayahuasca retreat. And all kinds of 3s are happening. You know, the ceremony starts on the 3rd day that we're there. I'm accidentally put into hut number 3. There were just all kinds of 3s going on. And so I was already thinking, okay, this is sort of weird. I knew at that point, 2.5 years ago, that 3s were a pattern. And so we were supposed to do the ayahuasca for 4 nights. I ended up doing it for 3, again, accidentally. That wasn't planned. And there's a shaman, and he's a Peruvian, and he is in the lineage of shamans who have carried on this tradition of ayahuasca, not as a drug, not as a let's have a crazy psychedelic experience. It's very meaningful to them. It's tradition, it's heritage, it's deeply, deeply in their lineage. It's also a deep, deep connection with the land and the spirits of the land that they honor very much. So they see ayahuasca, and now I understand why, they see ayahuasca as a living, conscious spirit that is a vine, but also ayahuasca you make from a vine and a plant. So they make it themselves, and then they give it to you, and you have your experience. So you do the ceremony in this round, totally round ceremonial hut called a Mallorca. And there were a group of us, 11 of us, and a shaman and 2 assistants. And you're supposed to start the ceremony at night because at night there's less auditory and visual stimulation. And so you're more able, you're in blackness, you're in darkness. And so you can focus more on what's going on. Also to help you, because ayahuasca is an incredibly sensory experience, like overall every sense suddenly goes doing and is really heightened, and it can be really overwhelming. So if you're in the dark, it's just helpful. So we begin, and it's the 3rd night of our retreat, which is a week long. And I take the ayahuasca and absolutely nothing happens. And I think I told you, or I mentioned this during the rabbit hole when I was talking about this to everybody in the rabbit hole in January, that I'm lying there and I'm like, I'm here, you know, I'm ready, come, I'm here, I want to communicate with you, like really talking to them, you know, really genuinely like, please show up, I need help, I need your guidance, I'm miserable, my life is not going the way I want it to, I'm receptive, you know, come, and all this stuff. And nothing happened. And I actually fell asleep and then got a big talking to about that from the shaman the next day. And then the second night, you take a little bit more ayahuasca if nothing's happened the night before. And so I took it. And by the way, it's the most terrible tasting stuff I've ever, it's just absolutely awful, but incredibly powerful and beneficial. So I take it the second night, again, nothing happens. Again, I'm lying there, come, I'm here, la, 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 you know. Nothing happens. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, is this going to be my experience? I came all this way and I'm that blocked that I can't access anything. Like, what's happening here? Well, the third night, take a little bit more ayahuasca and, you know, it was just immediately on another level. I mean, I started feeling it almost right away. So you go up to the shaman, you kneel in front of him, he gives you the ayahuasca and you take it. Tastes terrible. Go back to your mat and everybody's on a mat in a circle, right? And you can see each other, even though it's dark. It's after 7 p.m. at this point. You can see each other because there's 2 candles in the middle of the Mallorca, and there's netting that takes up the top third of the wall, and so you can see out into the jungle. You can see the night sky. There's a bit of night sky, you know, moonlight coming in, so you can see. And all of a sudden, that's not what I could see anymore. The very first thing that happened was I just started feeling it in my body. And I remember saying out loud, whoa. And other people heard me say that. They told me that the next day. I just said, whoa. And something starts happening to your whole being where you start kind of, well, my experience was I started kind of buzzing. And then I saw the shaman's voice as an actual visual thing. And what I didn't mention during Rabbit Hole is that his voice became many, 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 many voices. That was also one voice at the same time, but it was also many, many. And so this voice was coming from a spot where he was sitting on the floor and spiraling. It's this beautiful purple neon light spiral, just forever and ever and ever up into the sky. And he was chanting. And so that was something else. And then right after that, I became aware of sitting in what felt like the universe, like sitting in space. And just sitting on blackness, with blackness everywhere around me. I couldn't see anything. But coming out from underneath my body were all these glowing lines, like white glowing lines that were coming out from where I was sitting in space, going out and out and out forever and ever and ever, like endlessly in every direction from around me. And also lines that were crossing those lines. And where every line met, there was a dot of really bright glowing light. Multicolored light. And so it's like I'm sitting on a grid in the universe. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. And then I saw these flashes that were like someone was trying to get my attention. That's what it really felt like. So it was flash, 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 flash. This happened 3 times. Flash, 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 flash. And it was just like when you're driving and there's another car that's coming towards you and it flashes its high beams so that you know that your high beams are on. It was that kind of like, pay attention, hello, no, wake up. Yeah. So I felt that, and I was saying to myself, okay, I really have to pay attention. And this is in the midst of this really overwhelming sensory experience, and I'm breathing really deeply, and I'm kind of like rubbing my thighs and talking to myself, okay, Sinead, you know, just stay with this, just stay with it, go with it. And then suddenly I was inside a UFO. And I just knew I was inside a UFO. And there are 2 reasons why I feel that way. Well, 3 reasons. One is that I just had this feeling of I just suddenly knew where I was, even though I'd never been in a UFO before. I don't know what they look like inside. I just knew that that's where I was. And the second reason is because again, I could not see anyone around me anymore. I couldn't see the Mallorca. I couldn't see the shaman. I couldn't see the candles. What I did see is this beautiful streak of purple light, glowing purple light that was in a circle all the way around me, kind of higher up on the wall. And then underneath me, and this still gives me this this sort of thrilling feeling when I remember what this was like. I became aware of sitting on the ground or a floor or something, and underneath me, this incredibly powerful engine turned on, like huge, powerful engine, vibrating, reverberating, and it turned on underneath me. And so I felt that, and that was a really remarkable experience. And then all of a sudden I'm outside of the UFO, and I'm in, I think, the jungle, and I'm looking at it, but I can't really see it. It's not, that's not my focus. But I know it's there, and I can kind of see the sort of dim outline of it, and what looks like the entranceway. And then in front of the entranceway, there's a line of beings who are all not bodies at all. They're just light. They're just multicolored light, but they're not in body shapes. They're flowers and fireworks and lines and squiggles and twirls and just shapes, and they're moving and moving and moving a lot. And I knew that they were conscious beings because they were talking to me. They were telepathically talking to me. And it was this just huge wave of joy and enthusiasm, a lot of enthusiasm, and a very, very enthusiastic welcome. Like, we're so glad you're here. You're finally here. That's what it felt like. You're finally here. And I know that's something that is common among experiencers, that when they first meet a being, the being's like, finally, you made it. You know, what took you so long? It was sort of that feeling. And, you know, we're so glad you're here. And they just so much joy and so much enthusiasm and such a warm, enthusiastic welcome. And so they kept repeating those phrases over and over again. And so I was feeling very welcomed, like I was a hero returning from, you know, another country or something. It was really, really enthusiastic and just immediately a feeling of connection and just welcome. And so then that became, okay, with the same feeling of great enthusiasm, it became this urgency. Okay, we gotta go. You're coming. We're leaving now. You're coming now. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. You're coming. Come on. Let's go. You know, we're gonna take you and we're gonna show you stuff. And so then what happened was I started getting really distracted by what was happening to my physical body, because ayahuasca is really hard on your body and it's a purification thing. And so my stomach was going crazy. And I felt like I was sort of being pulled between this plane that I was on with them and all this communication I'm having with them and them telling me we got to go now, but also being aware of the fact that my physical body was in the Mallorca sitting on the floor. My stomach is going crazy and it's really uncomfortable. And they're also saying to me, your body has to be clean before you come with us. Your body has to be clean. And so I said, okay. And then I realized that meant that I had to basically let go, like physically let go. And I felt all this ego stuff about being embarrassed, you know, not wanting to do that in front of everybody. And then, you know, what would happen after that? Well, my mind goes off somewhere else. My body's going to be here sitting in this, like, how's that going to happen? I don't want to do that. So I just suddenly got really self-conscious, and it was a little bit stressful because I really, really wanted to go with them. I thought, I have to grab this opportunity and it just feels so good. And they're going to show me stuff. Like, who doesn't want to do that? I want to go to space, right? But at the same time, feeling very pulled down to earth by what was happening with my body. And it was really kind of too much. And meanwhile, they're like, we got to go. Come on. We got to go. Like, let's go. Come on. And so, I just couldn't do it. And so I said to them, I'm really, really sorry. I can't do this. This is too much. And I'm also experiencing all the sensory overload, right? It was very, very, very intense. And I'm breathing and I'm talking myself through it. And I wasn't scared, you know, it wasn't like that. It was just very intense. And so I ended up apologizing to them and saying, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. And I called the shaman over. And this is something I didn't mention during Rabbit Hole. I actually, first, before calling the shaman, I called this man named Ori, who was an absolutely lovely, just amazing person, Peruvian, and he was an assistant to the shaman. And he and I had kind of a nice bond. And so I felt like in that moment, when I felt really overwhelmed, it was him that I wanted to come and help me. So I called Ori, and he came over. And the next day he told me through the translator that when he came over, he reached down to comfort me by putting his hand on my shoulder. And something about the contact made him almost pass out. He almost fainted, yeah. And so he said it was like he suddenly got an electric shock and almost passed out. And his legs got wobbly and he had to suddenly re-support himself. And so he told me that the next day he hasn't had that happen before. That was a new experience for him. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, so then he's there with me, and I'm saying to him, I need help. And so then the shaman comes over and does some stuff, some ceremonial stuff on me, and feeds me this lemon and salt mixture to bring me back down, to help me come back down from the intensity. And then I go to the bathroom, and then I'm in the bathroom for like 3 hours. And it was just this whole other spiritual experience. Like I saw things and talked to beings and resolve stuff that I hadn't been working on for years, that I hadn't been able to resolve. And, you know, it was really quite something. And then I came back, and at that point, and with help, like I couldn't walk on my own. I actually couldn't see where the surface of anything was. I couldn't see where the floor was. It was sort of like the floor was many floors and the stairs were many stairs, and I didn't know where to put my feet. So people had to help me to and from the bathroom. And then I get back and I lie down on my mat, and I'm waiting to see if anything else is going to happen. But no, I'm coming down, the experience is ending. And so I wait for about an hour, and I realize I want to go back to my hut and I want to try to go to bed. I'm just worn out, right? So I make my way back to my hut, very carefully with a flashlight. And I get back to my hut, and I am trying to sleep, and I'm tossing and turning. And by this point, it's hours and hours later, right? So it's starting to get light outside. It's becoming very early in the morning. Okay, I'm just going to let myself be awake. So I turn over and look outside, and there's this giant winged being sitting in a tree right outside my hut, just sitting there, just hanging out, with its feet on the branch in front of it, just sitting there with these huge, huge wings coming down behind it. Huge being, like human looking body, just sitting there. And I did the same thing I did when I saw the jaguar face. I'm thinking, this can't be real. I've just taken ayahuasca. I'm sleep deprived. I must be making this up. So I did the whole rubbing my eyes, looking again, blinking, looking again, turning away, looking back. It just was there. It sat there with me until I fell asleep. And that was the first of 3 huge winged beings that looked just like that one that I had seen during my trip. The first 2 I saw when I took the Wachuma. Then the next day I felt changed. I really felt changed. And then there's an extension of this, which is that when I got back to Toronto days later, funny enough, there was a person who I met on the Spiritual Valley of the Incas tour, who had not been with me on the retreat afterwards, but who I bumped into in the airport in Lima on my way back to Toronto. And he was on his way to India. And he ended up not being able to go to India. He's an American. He ended up getting stuck in Toronto on quarantine because he didn't have the right documents to get to India. He hadn't had his yellow fever shot or something like that. And so he called me the same day I got back and said, Sinead, you're not going to believe this, but I'm stuck in Toronto. I've never been here before. I don't know what to do. Like, help me out. What do I do? And I have a second bedroom, a guest bedroom. So I said, come and stay with me. So he came, and we spent 4 days just blissed out from what we had experienced. And he had an incredible experience on ayahuasca too. Nothing ET related. With him, it was different. So we spent 4 days just drinking tea and sitting on the floor and like spending endless hours just with our minds just blown, you know, connecting over this amazing, wonderful, changing experience. And then I said to him, okay, it's been 4 days. We got to go outside. You know, we need food. We should get out and go for a walk. We should get some air. He didn't really care about seeing Toronto. He's very much a nature person, so he didn't really care. But we needed to get out. And so I said, okay, I'll take you down to Queen Street, which is a major street downtown. We'll just go for a walk. So here's something super weird. We're walking along Queen Street, and he says to me, Sinead, I'm hungry. I need to eat something. So I look ahead and I see this restaurant that's just coming up a few doors ahead of us. And at the same time, and I say, okay, let's go in there. He says, fine. And at the same time, I notice the restaurant. I see this man, this older man, long white hair in a ponytail, walking towards us down the sidewalk. And I just notice him. He stands out to me. And I just take note of that. And then we're walking towards the restaurant as I'm noticing this. And as we get closer to the restaurant, he turns and goes into the restaurant. And we turn and go in behind him. And we arrive in the restaurant. I've never been here before. And you have to order at the counter. And this man is standing right in front of me. And I just know I'm supposed to connect with this man. There's a reason why I'm noticing this man. So I'm standing there thinking to myself, how am I going to start a conversation with this guy? I don't know who he is. Maybe he won't want to talk to me. And so he has this beautiful brocade bag on his shoulder. And so I say, your bag is really beautiful. That's really nice. And he says, oh, thanks so much. I just got married in Turkey. My wife and I were going to go to Peru, but we decided to go to Turkey instead. And so I said, oh. So I said, well, I just got back, my friend and I pointed at my friend who's been staying with me. We just got back from Peru 4 days ago. And he kind of looks at me. And then he looks down, and I'm wearing a piece of the ayahuasca vine and a stone around my neck. He looks at that, he looks back up, and he says, did you do ayahuasca? And I said, yes. Have you done ayahuasca? He says, yes. And I'm thinking, this is really strange. And I said to him, I think I'm supposed to talk to you. And he goes, okay, I'll be out in the back having my sandwich and my coffee. So Daniel and I go up next and order our food, and then we go back out and we chat with this guy. First of all, I had been hearing the name Harold for months before that in my head. I don't know any Howard. I don't know any Howards, okay? Didn't know why I was hearing this name. I asked this guy what his name is. His name is Howard. And I've never met this guy before, never seen him before, right? So I say to him, you know, what is your experience with ayahuasca? And I tell him about my experience. And he says, well, there's a place not too far from here that does ayahuasca ceremonies. But he wouldn't tell me, he told me all about it, but he wouldn't tell me where it was or who was involved because it's illegal in Ontario. And he wanted to respect the people who were hosting the ceremonies. So I said, I just know I'm supposed to do ayahuasca again. I know that now I've invited her into my being. And I know now she's still with me because this is happening, meeting you, Howard, right now. And I know I'm supposed to do this again. So are you sure you really can't tell me where this place is? And he says, yeah, I'm sorry, I really can't do that. We talk a lot about ayahuasca. He's a very nice man. And then his wife comes over and joins in our conversation. It's really nice. And then I say, well, very nice to meet you. Bye-bye, you know, have a wonderful day. Daniel and I leave. About a month later, I am I've been invited to an eco conference. I'm a big hippie, so I go to this eco conference. And I see a colleague of mine there who has been on leave. And so I haven't seen her at work. And I say, hey, it's so nice to see you. You know, how are you? We sit down on a bench during a break in the conference and we start chatting. And I ask her how she is, and she bursts into tears. And I said, I'm so sorry, like, what's going on? And she said, well, I have this stuff that I'm working on, and ayahuasca has been helping me make my way through this. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, oh, there's a place not too far from here, outside of Toronto, where I go for these ceremonies. And I said, oh, that's so funny, because I just met this guy a month ago who told me about this place. She describes it. It's exactly the same place that he told me about. She's able to tell me where it is and give me contact information so I can go. Not only that, Howard is her ex-partner.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was so clearly a connection. That was not an accident. There's no way. That was way, way, way too coincidental. So I ended up going to this place and did ayahuasca again. It wasn't nearly like it was in Peru. And I realized that I actually have to be in Peru. I have to be on the land there. I have to be there for it to work. But going back to my initial experience, I felt like the beings were so enthusiastic to see me, partially because I think I know they've been trying to reach me for a very long time. And I was so blocked up mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'd become so disconnected from myself, I couldn't hear them. And so I think that they needed me to have taken the ayahuasca to get to me, to reach me. So ever since then, my life has gradually changed more and more. And then this past summer, 7 months ago, had this massive experience that literally changed me and changed my whole life overnight. And that's a whole other story. But yeah, that's what happened.
Wow. Fascinating. It's almost like I did the book on music, and it seems like you are tuned in. I mean, is that what you get the sense where you they got you on the path, they opened it up? Because you'll hear psilocybin, for example, you hear John Hopkins where they do the high dose psilocybin, whether it's dying cancer patients or addiction people or whatever, where they say it's one of the few times, the only time that they've ever seen where you can actually alter a person's thinking. Because you know what it's like a person gets down a route, you have all these sort of psychological things you do and counseling and stuff like that, but basically it's a slow go. Whereas if you're doing, they mentioned the psilocybin, it's like boom, it's absolutely flips them and almost like rewires the brain. Would that be sort of an accurate description, where it sort of rewires everything and you're sort of like cleans your brain out and puts you on the right path?
I felt like, yeah, I mean, I feel like my brain, to me, you know, one of the dreams that I've had over and over and over again in my life is of a house with many, many, many rooms. And I had this dream over and over and over and over again for years. And I after my ayahuasca experience, I felt like there was some sort of connection to that dream, because it's as if my brain is a house with many rooms, but most of the rooms I haven't had access to. And then it was like a door was opened and I was able to go into this room finally, right? I was able to finally access a part of my brain through taking the ayahuasca into my body. I was able to access another part of my mind, not even my brain, but another part of my mind, another way of thinking, another level of consciousness, really, another level of consciousness. Yeah.
Do you feel you're being guided in terms of?
100%. Absolutely. 100%. Yes. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just too many extraordinary things have happened. Yeah.
And a mission, do you believe, like you mentioned, you've been looking for, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Do you believe you have a mission? And do you seem to have a better idea now what that mission might be?
Well, I've always had this personal mission of, you know, the one thing I can say I've consistently been committed to is trying to be a better person. Trying to be a better person and trying to understand as much of everything as I could about the purpose of life. Now I feel like, yeah, I don't know if I have a mission. I just feel like I don't have to do anything. Like they're just rolling the carpet out in front of me. All I have to do is walk on it. You know, I mean, the number of things that are just arriving in my life that are the right people and the right situations, you know, opportunities, events that are occurring, they're just coming. And all I'm doing is doing my best to remain tuned in and to remain connected to them. It's just like I'm holding onto a cord. You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of, you know, when you see little kids who are out on a day trip with their teacher and they're all holding onto a rope so that they don't wander off. They all have one hand on a rope. I feel like I'm a kid holding onto the rope and they're just leading me. They're taking care of me. You know, everything is taken care of. I trust them 100%. They love me. I feel that. And they're looking out for me and they're taking me somewhere. And so I do feel, yeah, that it's unfolding more and more and more. The evidence, I mean, you are part of it, right? You know, like you're seeing the evidence too, because it's happening to both of us at the same time.
Yeah, I can back that up, that it was like dramatic. I mean, it was sort of like, I mean, I've had in the last couple of years some bizarre synchronicities, but not like one after another I mean, it was like, as I explained it with the the one time when you sent the one where, and I won't get into what we happened, but it was like, I just looked at the screen and I said, there's no way anybody's going to believe this happened. It was like, oh, and it was like, that was the second one. And then another one yesterday. And
Yeah.
it's like when you're in the flow or whatever it is, things, really nothing surprises you. And yet if you're on the outside, you would think like these people have lost it. I mean, they're just sort of making this stuff up or whatever.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it comes down to the experience where you can say you're in that, that state where you're with my mother ayahuasca or in the field or whatever you want to call it, where you know for sure that this is for real and you know that this is meaningful and it alters your life. And so that it comes down whether you're getting a noetic experience where something comes into your head in the middle of the night, or but this is experience, and that's how you change, that's how you learn, is through these types of experiences. And once it happens to you, you really can't deny it and you just go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the most wonderful feeling, you know. It really is just, it's indescribable. It's indescribably wonderful. It's not euphoria, you know, because I wouldn't want to be euphoric. I'd feel like that was too high. But I feel them. I feel them with me all the time. I feel them.
You mentioned that you didn't mention in this interview, but you mentioned in the, I think in the rabbit hole, you actually told them to tone it down a little bit, didn't you?
That was during ayahuasca. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it was too much.
Because their enthusiasm was just so much. And I said to them, you know, thank you so much. Like this is when I first saw the light beings outside of the ship. I said, thank you so much. I felt so much gratitude, you know, like I'm finally seeing you. This is happening. And I felt so much gratitude for the welcome and for their joy and for their enthusiasm, their happiness to see me. But it was also incredibly overwhelming. And so I literally did say, this is so great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I'm here. Can you just bring it down just a little, just a tad? You know, this is my first time. I haven't done this before. This is new to me. This is a lot. Thank you, but just a notch, just, you know. And maybe they did, but in my physical body, I couldn't feel any reduction in it. And I just had to let myself go with it as much as I could. Yeah.
Couple more questions because we're about to end here, but the type of experience, it's one of the things you and I have talked about, is this idea that you may manifest what you see. And when I heard you'd seen these sort of beings which weren't really physical beings, which were sort of very high excitement. It was sort of like a higher level type of being. And yet you get people who will say, oh, I had this experience. It was absolutely terrible. I was on a table and there was fear and all this kind of stuff. Did you have any fear during that experience? And do you think that—
None whatsoever. No part of this at all involves any fear at all. It's love. It's a lot of love. It's a lot of care and support and reassurance and love and guidance. It's extraordinary. And I think part of it is because, you know, I did make a commitment to myself that a long time ago that I would not live in fear. I don't believe in doing that. I feel that if you live in fear, if you believe, you know, someone could come and mug me, or the plane I'm on can crash, or whatever, then you're going to draw that towards you. And I don't want to live like that.
Yeah, that was the next question. You answered my next question, which is, did you take that in? Your attitude sort of produces the event you've got, that you weren't fearful when you went there. Whereas if you were sort of fearful, you might have had you know, a more fearful experience.
Oh yes.
Them using that to teach you a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, there were people in my retreat group, you know, during the ayahuasca retreat. There were people who said, "I'm very nervous. I don't know what to do." I felt like, and then they had scary experiences, very scary experiences. I feel like, you know, I've worked really, really, really hard on myself for a really long time. And so I believe in embracing fear. I believe that in order to make your peace with fear, you have to embrace it like a friend. You know, you have to welcome it towards you, because then you realize as soon as you do that, that it's really so small. And so when I got to Peru and I started to do this retreat, this ayahuasca retreat, I had already spent many, many, many years looking at myself as brutally and honestly as I could. I don't want to live with a lot of ego, it's very uncomfortable to live that way. I don't want to live like that. Of course, I still have it. I always have to work on it, but I didn't want to live with a lot of ego. I didn't want to be hurting people in my life by not listening to what they were experiencing about how I might be harming them or hurting them or whatever. You know, I just wanted to become a better person. And so when I arrived in Peru, I felt like I'd already, that's our timer. I felt like I'd already started the process of facing myself. And really what ayahuasca does is she shows you yourself. She reveals you to yourself. And so I wasn't scared about that because I'd already started that process, right? And so I feel like that was helpful for me in that particular experience. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. You've left a wonderful message for people. And for people who are watching, I've invited Sinead to join me with a number of interviews. And as you can see, she's wearing red, and I'll explain to you what red means later on in terms of how I see reality. She's a very in-tune person, and is going to be a welcome addition to teaching me things and to asking questions of people that we're going to interview. And we'll get next time into maybe a little bit about your UFO, where you get thrown into the UFO world, and that's where you meet me. And I want to thank you so much for sharing this with me and with everybody. And everybody will, I think, be very happy to see you on a number of the broadcasts. And I think you're going to contribute an awful lot to changing the vibration of the world, and of getting a message to the world that there can be a better world, and this is how we can do it.
Grant, that's so kind, and I really appreciate that's such wonderful feedback. And you know, I'm so grateful to have met you. It's so much fun, and we're just connecting on so many levels, and we're doing so many great things together. And I'm excited, and I really appreciate the support. And you know, I'm learning a huge amount from you too. It just feels like it's a meant to be connection. We're going to do great things together. I'm sure of it. I'm excited.
It's been like a roller coaster ride. I mean, it's been, you know, you see the UFO experiences, and then you get this, and you're just going like, wow. And that's what one of the theories I have, which we'll get into and get the UFO thing, is called the theory of wow. That, you know, when you get those experiences, those are the ones that stick with you and maybe teach you some stuff. So thanks again. And you'll be joining me in an interview momentarily, and we're going to get into physical mediumship, which I think is the Super Bowl of all paranormal stories. And so you'll be joining me on that. And for everybody's listening, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.